All right, one thing that you're supposed to do on your 600-mile run-in, which is a common problem with this 850GS or GS Adventure, is the steering head nut is loose. Not this one on top, but the ones on the bottom. There's two big nuts around the column there, and those need to be tightened. I went online. There's Wrenching with Bob is a great YouTube channel who tells you how to do all this, but he doesn't actually show you how to do it. So what I'm going to do in this video is show the process start to finish. It's pretty simple as far as your tools. You're going to need, you can use something else, but I'm going to use T60 to take that on and off. And then you have a T40 for your pinch bolts on the fork there. BMW does have a special tool to tighten those nuts down to 15 Newton meters. I am just going to use a pair of channel locks and do it by feel. As you can see down there, some of the grease has come out of the bearing, which is an indicator that those two nuts right there, the bottom one, is loose. And on Wrenching with Bob's video, that clip right there ends up about right there. So it's just going to be a little simple adjustment. And how I noticed this is I started to hear a little clunking on the front end going over big bumps. If you guys have been following the channel, you've seen that I've done quite a bit of off-road riding lately with this bike. One thing that I like to do to cheat for torque specs, now some people don't like doing this because it marks up their bike, but you can take rubbing alcohol and clean the bike when you're done. But I put marks on everything so that I can kind of cheat and know what the torque specs are. You can see I did that on the pinch bolts as well. I'm going to do a time-lapse process of how to get this done, and hopefully it takes care of that clunk on the front end there and stops that grease from coming out. Couple interesting things to note here. There's no grease on here, but on the instructions it says to put a little FPE grease there. And then there's also no Loctite, which is kind of odd that it comes from the factory with no Loctite, probably why it's loose. With the Wrenching with Bob video, you don't put any on like the first centimeter, then you do there for about 2 centimeters or whatever, and then you don't do the rest. So we're going to grease this up properly with some graphite lube and put the blue Loctite on it after we tighten that nut down just a little bit. That was actually pretty simple. We got everything tightened back up. You can see that my marks there don't line up, but that's to be expected because we tightened those two nuts right there, which lowered that a little bit. So expecting that to be about 1/8 of a turn farther makes sense. My cheat marks on the pinch bolts, I lined those up perfectly, and that is your 19 Newton meters. The line is just barely visible right there, which is what you want to see. The line is just barely visible. That's what you want to see there. See the pinch bolt marks line up perfectly as well. And got some Loctite on there, which surprisingly from the factory it did not have Loctite, which it's supposed to. Nothing is loose. We're going to take it for a ride here, make sure nothing comes loose. And that is pretty easy. The 850GS, common problem. Your steering column nut there is not tight enough. The two nuts below it are what need to be tightened. You can see the clip is in there connecting them together. I did scratch it up a little bit with channel locks, but I don't have the appropriate tool that BMW would have. And we got it to where it should stop leaking grease like that nastiness. The torque specs on this are 130 Newton meters and 19 Newton meters. T60 and T40. I used channel locks and blue Loctite on the steering nut. I know a lot of people don't like to mark up their bike with black Sharpie marks, but I do just for safety. You can see the old mark, and I put a new mark there, so if it does loosen while I'm riding, I'll notice that right away. If you ever go to sell the bike, obviously you can just clean them off.